Welcome back to our channel. Today, we're delving into one of the most intriguing and enigmatic stories in the Bible, the moment that God transformed the powerful King Nebuchadnezzar into an animal. Have you ever wondered why such a powerful ruler would end up living like a beast and crawling on all fours, eating grass? What does this mean for us today? This story is full of lessons about God's sovereignty and pride, and I promise you won't want to miss the amazing transformation that occurs at the end. Before we begin, please hit the like button if you're eager to learn something new. Do not forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of our future videos that uncover powerful truths from the Bible. Stay tuned until the very end, where we'll discuss what Nebuchadnezzar's humbling experience means for you and how it applies to our daily walk with God. What happened to Nebuchadnezzar can still teach us valuable lessons today, and the truth revealed in this story might just change the way you view success, humility, and God's role in your life. Additionally, we'd love to hear what lesson from this story most resonates with you. Please share this movie with your friends and family so they can be inspired by God's wisdom as well. Let's get right in and find out why God made King Nebuchadnezzar a beast. Before we do so, let's examine this king's character and the significance of his story. One of the most strong and significant monarchs in antiquity, King Nebuchadnezzar II was not your typical monarch. He ruled from roughly 605 to 562 BC, and during that time, Babylon rose to prominence as one of the most famous empires in history. During his reign, Babylon was renowned for its enormous wealth, military might, and stunning architectural feats, the most well-known of which was the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, which is regarded as one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, though historians disagree about its existence. The legend of the gardens represents the grandeur and luxury of Babylon. In 586 BC, Nebuchadnezzar led the destruction of Jerusalem, the sacred city of the Jews, tearing down its walls, burning the temple, and taking the Israelites into captivity. This event, known as the Babylonian exile, was a crucial moment in biblical history because it marked the fulfillment of God's warnings to the Israelites for their disobedience. During his reign, Nebuchadnezzar expanded his empire by conquering many surrounding nations, including Judah, the kingdom of God's chosen people. 10-6 in 2 Kings 24 and 1-21 in 2 Kings 25. Nebuchadnezzar was a major player on the world scene at the time due to his legacy as a conqueror and builder, but what really sticks out is his relationship with the God of Israel. Despite being a pagan king who worshipped numerous gods, his encounters with the Jewish exiles in the Bible, especially Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, provide us a deep insight into his personality. Nebuchadnezzar's life was influenced by his multiple experiences with the true God, the God of Israel, which ultimately resulted in his experience of humility. Nebuchadnezzar first encounters God's might in the book of Daniel when he experiences unsettling nightmares that none of his magicians, enchanters, or clever men can decipher. Daniel, a young Hebrew prisoner, deciphered these dreams and revealed the mysteries that God had given him. Daniel boldly informs the king that the God of heaven is the source of his success and power after interpreting Nebuchadnezzar's dream about a large statue composed of many materials that symbolized various countries. In Daniel 2 verses 37-38. This verse is important because it proves that God himself gave Nebuchadnezzar his authority. Your Majesty, you are the King of Kings. The God of heaven has placed all of humanity, the animals of the field, and the birds in the sky wherever they reside. He has given you dominion, power, might, and glory in your hands. Even though he was a pagan king, God's sovereign plan included Nebuchadnezzar's ascent to power and his expansive dominion. God put him in this position of influence in the same way that God controls the rise and fall of all rulers and empires. But with great authority comes great pride. Romans 13 verse 1. As his empire prospered and he attained monumental success, Nebuchadnezzar's heart, like that of many rulers throughout history, became lifted up in pride. Instead of acknowledging God's involvement in his triumphs and successes, Nebuchadnezzar began to take all the credit for them. When Daniel's friends Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refused to bow down to a golden image that Nebuchadnezzar had erected, he became so angry that he ordered them to be thrown into a fiery furnace. Even after God miraculously saved them from the flames, Nebuchadnezzar did not fully comprehend the depth of God's authority, even though he acknowledged God as the God who saves. This is one of the most striking examples of Nebuchadnezzar's pride. Daniel 3 verses 28 to 29. His heart was proud and unrepentant. In Daniel chapter 4, we learn about Nebuchadnezzar's second experience with God's power, which manifested as a puzzling and unsettling dream that rocked him even though he was the most powerful monarch of the ancient world at the beginning of the chapter. Nebuchadnezzar opens by narrating his dream in his own words, demonstrating that despite being a king, something about this vision left him extremely disturbed and in need of answers once more. In the past, he had called upon the wise men of Babylon, astrologers, and magicians to interpret the dream for him. But none of them were able to provide an explanation. It's crucial to remember that, despite being considered masters of Babylonian wisdom and mystical arts, these men were helpless in the face of a divine message. This is a crucial contrast that the book of Daniel repeatedly highlights. God's wisdom and revelation always outweigh human wisdom. Ultimately, Daniel, also known by his Babylonian name Belteshazzar, was called upon. In earlier chapters, Daniel had already shown that he had been given the ability to interpret dreams, but this time the message would be more severe and personal. Daniel was trusted by King Nebuchadnezzar because he embodied the spirit of the holy gods. Daniel 4 verse 18, but since he was still unaware of the real God underlying Daniel's insight, let's explore the dream. These are the visions that Nebuchadnezzar recounted in Daniel 4 verses 10 to 12. As I lay in bed, I looked around and saw a tall, massive tree in the center of the land. Its top reached the sky, its leaves were lovely, its fruit was plentiful, and it provided food for everyone. The wild animals found refuge beneath it, and the birds lived in its branches, and every creature was fed by it. This image of the tree is potent and symbolic. The tree, which stands in for Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom, was majestic, towering above everything and offering protection and sustenance to all living things on earth. Nebuchadnezzar was at the height of his power and, like the tree, he was regarded as the source of strength, prosperity, and security for his people. The tree was visible to the ends of the earth. At the time, Babylon was the world's superpower. It had conquered nations, controlled vast resources, and provided shelter to the numerous peoples under its rule. An appropriate representation for Nebuchadnezzar, who considered himself to be the king of the known world. The king continued, in the visions I saw while lying in bed, and there before me was a holy one, a messenger coming down from heaven. He called in a loud voice, "Cut down the tree and trim off its branches, strip off its leaves, and scatter its fruit, allowing the animals to flee from under it and the birds from its branches." Babylon's empire was vast and wide, and its king was the symbol of power, wealth, and dominion. However, what transpired in the dream indicated that this grandeur would not last forever. The dream did not end with complete destruction, though, as a heavenly messenger orders the once mighty and flourishing tree to be cut down. This represents the fall of Nebuchadnezzar, who was once at the pinnacle of human achievement. The branches are trimmed, the leaves are stripped, and the animals scatter. The kingdom that Nebuchadnezzar had built would soon face up, and he and the king himself would be removed from their position of authority. Daniel 4 verse 15 states, "But let the stump and its roots bound with iron and bronze remain in the ground in the grass of the field." The stump's roots remaining intact is significant because it symbolizes a hope for restoration. God, in his mercy, was not going to destroy Nebuchadnezzar or his kingdom entirely, but he would severely humble him until he accepted God's sovereignty. A reminder of God's kindness is that even in times of judgment, there is always an opportunity for redemption when we humble ourselves. The iron and bronze binding of the stump also suggests that Nebuchadnezzar's fall would be restrained and under control. Daniel, who is now extremely disturbed by the interpretation, tells Nebuchadnezzar about the dream in Daniel 4 verses 24 to 25. Daniel states, "This is the interpretation of your majesty, and this is the decree that the Most High has issued against my lord the king. You will be driven away from people and live with the wild animals. You will eat grass like the ox and be drenched with the dew of heaven. 7 times, you will be passed by until you realize that the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth and can give them to whoever he pleases. The haughty king must have been shocked by Daniel's remarks. Nebuchadnezzar was symbolized by the tree, and its fall meant that he would lose his mind and his dignity as a king. As part of God's punishment, Nebuchadnezzar would lose his status and reason, be forced to live like an animal, eat grass like an ox, and be cut off from human civilization. This crazy punishment was meant to teach Nebuchadnezzar a valuable lesson: God alone is sovereign over all earthly kingdoms. The expression 7 times denotes a span of 7 lengthy years. Until he accepted the supremacy of God, Nebuchadnezzar would be degraded and forced to live like an animal. This punishment was intended to humble the most powerful man on earth and demonstrate to him that, in spite of all his accomplishments, he was still subject to the Creator's authority. Daniel also begs Nebuchadnezzar in verse 27. Thus, if your majesty agrees with my counsel and repents of your faults by acting morally and your wickedness by showing compassion to the downtrodden, perhaps your prosperity will continue in this verse. Even after Daniel, Nebuchadnezzar interpreted the dream and received a clear and sobering warning from God, his pride kept his heart hardened for a full year. In a moment of God's justice, Nebuchadnezzar lost his throne and all of his possessions. The same king who had been bragging about his glory and power was now deprived of everything he had valued, including his wealth, status, and throne. However, the judgment did not end with the loss of his throne. As a result of a disease that can be characterized as a type of insanity, Nebuchadnezzar was expelled from human society and forced to live like an animal, a penalty that strikingly reflected the pride he had once held. He was soaked in the dew of heaven, exposed to the elements, and his hair grew long like an eagle's feathers and his nails like a bird's claws. The great monarch, who previously ruled over vast countries, now crawled on the ground, munching grass like an ox, unable to even reason like a human being. Daniel 4 verse 33. One of the most potent examples of God's capacity to humble the arrogant is the image of Nebuchadnezzar, the once glorious ruler who is now brought to this animal-like state. This abrupt change from royal splendor to an existence resembling that of an animal serves as a sobering warning to all of us. God takes human pride seriously, as demonstrated by Nebuchadnezzar's experience. When we elevate ourselves and deny God's influence in our lives, we run the risk of being brought low. Pride brings us to the truth of God's authority, allowing us to claim credit for things that are solely His. The 7 years that Nebuchadnezzar's illness lasted, 7 times, according to most scholars, were important because they allowed him to lose his pride and learn that he was totally dependent on God for everything. During this time, he was isolated from society and lived in seclusion, cut off from the throne and the kingdom he had once ruled. The question that now emerges is why God transformed Nebuchadnezzar into an animal and why God chose such a severe and degrading punishment for this powerful monarch. The answer is found in a profound lesson that God was imparting to Nebuchadnezzar and to all of us through him about God's sovereignty and the perils of human pride. Nebuchadnezzar's transformation into an animal was a deliberate act intended to lead the king to a state of profound humiliation and repentance, not a random act of punishment or a random demonstration of God's power. We appreciate you joining us on this trip through Nebuchadnezzar's story, which serves as a potent reminder that humility and acknowledging God's authority over our life are the keys to genuine greatness. Please give this video a thumbs up if you learn anything today, and think about subscribing to our channel for more biblical insights. Please share this video and leave a comment below with the teachings that most resonated with you. May God bless you, and keep in mind that humility before our all-powerful God is the route to true greatness.